Okay, so start formulating your questions. And I'm going to request that you not come to the microphone and tell your story, because you're going to have opportunities to do that. I'm going to tell you how to get connected. So I'm going to name by region, I'm going to name your midwifing team again, so you know that if you aren't already connected to this rise in the tide, we want to include you. And so if you are from the Pacific Western region, Ken Brown, and I'm also seeing Gina Lease, Doran Adams, Gina Lease. If you are from New England, it's Joe Sullivan and Karen Bellavance Grace. If you're from Mid-America, it's Dory Davenport. Oh, there's Dory. If you're from the Central Eastern regional group, Mark Bernstein and Joan Van Beesler are your go-to people. And then if you're in the Southern region, it's Ken Hurto and Carlton Elliott Smith. And if you're sitting here thinking, I don't know what my region is, contact me, trogers@uua.org, and we will totally get you hooked up. Now, we're getting you hooked up into are resources that are being developed as we do this cross-learning. We've got learning circles going on, so you could virtually have a learning team that you don't have to make this stuff up on your own. You get together and talk about what are the challenges with folks who are also doing this work. And if you want the full meal deal workshop, then we can also help make that happen. So we want to receive your questions now. Please come to the microphone so everybody can hear you and ask these good. You can ask a global question. You can ask an individual question about any of the models. Come on up. Come on up, siblings in faith.
Hi, I'm Julie Leach from Sarasota, Florida, Congregation. Just have a question for both San Diego and Jefferson. Could you just explain your staffing model really quickly for each of those two? And the worship is, you said it was live, and I didn't hear about the Jefferson one,
So in San Diego, we've grown into what we do right now. And when we were at the school and we did not have an intern focused on South Bay, they had sermons that were part live, because Arvid would go down there once a month and I would go down there once a month, and the other two were videoed a week delay. Once we put together our internship to be half at each campus, that allowed live services, and our part-time staff coordinator of that ministry team works with our intern, is a worship associate, helps facilitate program. So Kristen Carriga is our staff person, part-time at that. She also is part-time social justice. And South Bay wanted its advertising to be through justice work in the community, so it was a very natural fit to put her at South Bay. So we now have 4 live services. One of those will be multi-generational. Our children stay in 2 of those services a month for the whole service. And then 2, they go to their own RE class, which is parent-driven, parent-led. So we have shared staff. Our membership person is the same at both campuses, but we do membership differently at South Bay than we do at Hillcrest in terms of process. That's true across the board. All of our staff have offices at Hillcrest campus, but the intern and the South Bay minister both also have an office at South Bay and hold regular office hours.
Boy, do I wish our answer was that simple, which sounded complicated enough. So our staff has been undergoing a great deal of transition for a number of reasons, and we don't have a clear staffing model for our second campus. What we have had is a staff member who started out as our volunteer coordinator and is now our director of congregational engagement. She has really held this thing together. And the transition in our staff has been a lot of ministers, actually, because we have gone from a very specialized ministry model where there was silos, essentially, to my expectation, which is that if you are a minister, you have to be able to preach, pray, and be able to stand up and say something in public to witness at a social justice event. So we're in that transition, so that has meant that we haven't had the stability running through our second campus in terms of preachers. For the coming year, we have a new assistant minister beginning in August 1. We also have an intern. So my commitment to the second campus, we meet twice a month, is that the three of us will rotate. They will only be getting us, only the three of us. And we'll be hiring a site coordinator.
I just wanted to chime in because we have a slightly different model. So we have 3 campuses. Each campus has its own religious educator. Each campus has its own campus minister. One is quarter time, one is half time, and we scale things accordingly. We also have a creative team meeting every week where we go over all the sermons, all the adult and children's faith formation stuff. But getting the model right is tricky because a lot of times it hasn't been done before. So that's how we do it.
Hi, I'm Jane Page, and my question is probably a little more on the emotional side of things and how to deal with some congregants' feelings. I am completing my 8th year in Statesboro, Georgia, as their halftime minister. Starting in September, I will also be the halftime minister in Brunswick, Georgia, which is 2 hours down the road. I have rented a little small apartment there, and so I'm hoping to have a great yoked ministry, as you talked about, and being able to. We even have a workshop plan for sharing our ministries. So we're trying to be very upbeat about it. But I've had a couple of board members that said it feels like I'm having an affair. I've told them, I said, well, it's polyamory. It's going to be all right. But and I can laugh about it a little bit, but I can laugh a lot about it a little bit. But I really am a little concerned because I've been with them so long about these feelings, and even on the other side too. When I was in Brunswick with the program committee planning, I said something about, well, at my home, and I was speaking about my home in Statesboro, and they said we would like for you to say my home in Statesboro. So it's a little bit of feeling of whose am I guess. Mm-hmm. And I that's not the way I wanted it to feel like, and I don't think it does with everybody, but there are some that I don't know, maybe you can, if you've dealt with it, share with me.
Scott?
All joking aside about your polyamory, actually maybe I do want to joke. The South, right, is where you're from?
The deep South, Southeast Georgia.
Yeah, I'd recommend probably not putting that in your mission statement in the end. But all experiments are useful. I think you answered your own question. In my experience, in serious about talking about love, I think this is a human problem, not really a technical. There's a ton of technical stuff, right, that we could think of. But if you love both equally, they will know it. If the unique identity of each is parts that you appreciate the diversity of each genuinely, not really favor the one, and they get the feeling that really you're just slyly trying to morph the other. But if you genuinely love them and the uniqueness of each church, I think it all takes care of itself. The other thing I would say is, I think systems-wise, it's a great opportunity from what you just said to help both congregations move from discussions around loving the minister to loving the work. Amen. And that's what every congregation needs to go through no matter what. And loving each other. No, that's great.
Hi, my name is Molly Hausch-Gordon. I serve our congregation in Columbia, Missouri. And my congregation is surrounded east, north, and west for about 115 miles or more by rural farmland and progressive people in those places who feel very isolated. And so I would be interested in hearing if there are any congregations. I know a lot of our congregations in the Mid-America region may be in similar situations, and I'm interested to hear if there's anyone doing that particular form of rural outreach. And the second part of my question has to do with what's been represented here today. It's mostly been large churches seeding sort of or merging with or yoking with mini church, sort of done in a very traditional church way. And I am with a mid-sized church. It doesn't have a large staff team. And I'm wondering if there are models of doing less traditional church models, house churches, commissioning lay leadership. What kind of other models are there other than a large church seating a mini church, even if it's not a mini me? Are we experimenting with different models that might be more functional for folks in different resourcing situations? Columbia, Missouri.
I think to your first question, and I feel a bit remiss in not mentioning this, I think Christine Robinson in Albuquerque, who started this before San Diego, and I mean, she's one of the pioneers for us in this. Her situation is very similar to yours geographically, where they have 2 other sites through technology and lay worship associates that have a live liturgy but a streamed sermon, but it comes from that church in downtown Albuquerque. And she would be a great contact and resource about the geography and extending yourself without extending your staff. And
Albuquerque's great because they were also much smaller than they are, the main campus, than they were before they started. And not only did the other campuses that they are extended into growing, but the main campus is also growing. So it's one of those, if you want to learn, you teach. If you want to grow, you spread the word out.
Yeah, and also I should say I am not at a large church. When I got to Houston, it was 299. It's about 370. That's a mid-size too. I actually think the mid-sized congregations may be in the best position to do new satellite starts. If you're at a 1,000-member congregation and you go 10%, that's 100 people, right? So why would you bother with something that was really, really small? We also tend to be in metro areas. So one model is, you mentioned house churches and commissioning lay leaders. I think that really could be a perfect model for your size congregation. That was what I intended to do, but this other thing landed in our laps. But the idea is you do your adult faith formation, growth groups, covenant groups, whatever you want to call it, and you start those at about a 10-mile distance from where your current congregation is, or whatever thing makes sense. Because people who are more than 10 miles will probably not drive into Columbia from wherever they are. But yeah, I would definitely underscore Christine Robinson. I think we've all learned from her. She's had workshops here at GA. She's got, I think, 4 different and very different satellites. So she's really been able to look at it in a lot of different ways.
I would second, because you had 2 sort of questions, right? How to reach out when they aren't there, but also different size. The first thing I would highlight about the yoked is it happens in our case to have been size, but really, I would say the model does not depend on the size, and it really was sharing staff. The other thing I would say is we have 5 examples of small congregations coming together, and another 3 or 4 of mid-sizes coming together to do yoking. So we have that out there. And when Tandy talked about the learning circles, so besides Albuquerque, I would say that's where the learning circles will come in, because we just sort of have been at this for more than a year. So you have plenty of resources there. And then the other thing I would say is what makes me very excited about the multi-site is connecting it with congregations and beyond. Because part of when we talk about networks, I think we need to talk about not networks of congregations, but networks of connection points, right? Eventually where we're going is it could be a house church, it can be a intentional living community, but all networked together.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi. Al Daniels, Norwich, Connecticut. And our picture is, it's one of those of, we are afraid of becoming an example of Brown versus the Board of Education, separate not being equal. Our fear is that, and to keep the story short, a couple of years ago we sold our old big building, so now we're flush with cash, short on members, a couple of growing congregations in the area, so this model would work, one of these models would work really well But now do we just hand over the cash and all of a sudden, we're the redhead stepchild in the crew and they're, having to always go to them with our hand out.
No, a minute.
So that is our fear. And a number of congregations, other small congregations, have come to us and said, oh, we should get together and do this. And it's like, and we push our hands deeper in our pockets and say, come on now, what do you bring to the table? That's our fear. And the two, just so you know, the two bigger congregations, they've had plans in the works for things to go on, and you hear over the grapevine, we just couldn't quite make it to the goal to make that happen. So we believe our fears are legitimate.
Before we answer, have you met Joe Sullivan?
Hi, Joe.
He's your midwife coach. All right.
Yeah, and Joe's a great guy. So when we merged, one of the congregations that we merged with was called Thoreau in Stafford, Texas. And they had $300,000 dedicated to a building fund. So they had essentially the same concern that you have. The three big concerns that came up were about identity, about money, and about the video sermons. And I'm sure we can all address all three of those, but I'll just stick with the money part. So there were all kinds of elaborate plans that were hatched. Oh, we'll set up a separate 3-member commission that will be a separate nonprofit corporation, and they'll make the decisions and so forth. And basically, now you're talking about trust. Because if you don't have trust, I tell you what, policy governance will never work, right? And the merger will never work either. So how do you demonstrate that you're worthy of that trust? Well, probably in your church and other churches, people give bequests. They give money to the endowment. There are designated gifts. And there's an understanding that not only will the current leadership abide by those rules, but the future leadership will. And so people make those gifts all the time. So what we said was, okay, we're gonna get this into our governance documents that says that this money can only be used to purchase real estate in Fort Bend County. And if that's not done in 20 years, I think the money goes to the UUA or something like that. There are safeguards that you can put into place to take care of that. But the other thing I would say about identity is the people who are at the location make up the identity, right? You can change your building, you can change all this stuff, but the loss of identity is a real issue. But the money part is actually pretty straightforward if you have the trust.
I just wanted to speak also to capacity and being strategic. So people who helped seed the South Bay campus from Hillcrest wanted the same amount of programs, the breadth of programming and worship and music, and we didn't have the capacity to do the same at both places. We don't have the capacity of lay leadership at South Bay that we do the Hillcrest. So we've had to engage in the conversation about how do we maintain our capacity and engagement of leaders and be extremely strategic about where we are putting our resources, not just of money, but of energy and people's time. And it took a little while for the older folks who have been part of Hillcrest to get used to thinking in that model. But they have found that they have found a deeper commitment, and they've gone deeper in the programs because there are fewer, but it's not less in quality, not less in depth, and not less in ship building. And being more strategic has allowed them to do things that Hillcrest cannot do. And we've had Hillcrest folks join South Bay in some of that programming because it's only happening at South Bay, like the language exchange, like our detention center visitation program, and other things.
Hi, my name is Patricia Hennigan, and I'm from the UU Congregation of Princeton, New Jersey. And I have a question. When you set up the satellite location, particularly for San Diego. What does that initial outreach look like, and how is it received, and how do you reach the people in the new area to get interest there?
Well, we followed the UUA's recommendation by doing a mailing, and we put a lot of time in demographic study and a lot of time in making a really flashy postcard that got mailed out, and we really created some nice enemies. They didn't want that stuff mailed to them. Now, that's not true for everybody, and some people found us solely through that. But what really worked for us, we moved out of a suburban elementary school onto Broadway in a strip mall that had a big sign. And we are situated between the tattoo parlor, the karate studio, and a hairdresser's. We've had our young adults from our Hillcrest campus come down to the various parks in Chula Vista and do guerrilla chalk art. We've had temporary tattoos on our forearms with our website. We have been extremely out front at every festival, every fair, every public gathering in Chula Vista with a booth, with our literature, and the fact that we had bilingual people in our campus ready to go really made a difference for Chula Vista.
So you got the building before you had the people.
Well, we had the people before. Actually, we had more people than we did building, but our growth really started when we got downtown Broadway rather than a suburban elementary.
Thank you.
Sure.
And for the record, I am not the one who told her to do mail.
The mail worked for the traditional folks, but it didn't work for the wider culture of folks we were going for.
I'm Pat Manley. I'm a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church, area church at First Parish in Sherborne, Massachusetts. When I put my zip code into the UUA.org to find a congregation, 70 come up within 25 miles. The closest to and I belong to the church that is closest to me, but two churches very close that my congregation in Sherborne is in between are both struggling. One struggling desperately to stay alive in big, old New England church buildings with huge building costs. And I have been saying for a long time, how do we get us to work together without the church that is the most successful feeling like chauvinists and being perceived as chauvinists? And what are you trying to get out of us, and are you trying to make us close? So I'm fascinated by all of these models, particularly, well, not even particularly, but the yoked model seems the most possible. But I am very concerned about how we even make that initial outreach to say, how do we talk together? Once or twice.
In some ways, I'm very tempted not even to answer because you've just lifted up a challenge for us all. And I'm thinking about the Cambridge platform. I mean, the other reason I'm very excited about multi-site is I think there's possibilities of not just seeing this as a technical fix, but a chance to go back. And we all should be rereading the Cambridge platform about the hopes that what this really was about was not just having Joe come out to help you technically figure out how to do this better, but having Joe come out and midwife a discussion among you all to find the mission that you all have for that zip code area. So this is not just about mission for each church, but what mission do we want together for that region? So, I mean, there's a lot of, again, technical things I would do we can answer, but I think that's the bigger issue. And by the way, New England is ripe for this.
Oh, yeah.
There's a different model about reaching out to make sure in the West or the Midwest or other parts of the country, how do we fill the gaps in between the churches with some of these models? How do we fill out the blank spots or that space? But in New England,
Yeah, when we're 3 miles apart.
this is it.
There aren't these big gaps.
Right. and again, I don't want to get all preachy, but our heart should break because it does not represent our theology to have 5 congregations stone throw and siloed.
Right. Absolutely.
I do want to get preachy. So let me say this. I shared this with the panel in a phone conversation that we had. One of the most heartbreaking experiences I've had at a General Assembly it was at one of those in-gatherings for the various regions. And the staff had for every congregation that was in the room, we had to say something that was going well for us and then a challenge. And the very heartfelt hope was that we would hear ourselves in each other's voices, representing that Cambridge platform, that we are there for each other, that we do represent a greater whole. And what I witnessed in that room, this was early in my ministry, what I witnessed in that room is when somebody would say, oh, we've got this going well, there's a sense of, oh, well, we could never do that, right? And when there was an elder fellow from a small congregation who stood up and introduced himself and with tears in his eyes said, I'm so tired. My congregation is so small. We are getting older. We don't know if we should just sell the building. We've tried every outreach we can think of. We can't attract a minister. What do we do? And we're in a conservative area. And what I heard around me was, well, we're in a conservative area and we're 400. Well, we're in a conservative area, but we've got multiple. I heard this competition. And I think what Scott is saying is just alive and well. We need to understand ourselves as a greater whole. Yes. We just do. And so we have to understand that there are only 3,500 of us or whatever there are at this General Assembly. And there are many, many more that are in our congregations that don't get to have their fire lit, that not only don't have the learnings of workshops, the memories of meeting new friends, the ironies of the phrases you collect, like we were worshiping at the Dunkin' Donut Center. I mean, just how fabulous is that? but you don't have that sense that you are marching in the same way. So good for you that you're raising this. It's a challenge for all of us to take this back to our congregations. It says, how are we not only members of our own congregation, but how do we not just neighbor each other, but how do we companion each other on the journey?
That's right.
End of sermon. Thank you for listening.
That's right.
Thank you. Yep, 2 more.
Good morning. My name is Michael Brown. I'm currently starting my 5th of 3 years at Meadville Lombard. And as a seminarian, I realized that and with someone with an accounting background, I'm wondering about the elements of allocation of salaries for shared staff. I would envision there would be circumstances where there are congregations that are financially healthy, sharing staff with congregations that aren't. And I have seen at my time on the board of my home congregation, believe it or not, conflict about money. Who knew? But has there been any discussion in these various examples? And oh, by the way, I should say, this question probably for you too. Are the regions working on some models of compensation? What percentage, what congregation gives based on what percentage of time each staff is at each site? And is there a component of this that relates to ministerial, the ministers of each congregation being a part of this conversation that makes it more than just about money?
So 2 things that we do in Houston. One is that we're able to do this. Everyone is paid fair compensation. The second thing is that 90% of the money that's raised at any particular campus stays at that campus. That was just one of the things that one of the smaller campuses wanted to have in place to make sure that one of the other campuses just didn't take the money. So fair compensation, 90% of the money stays there. One of the campuses, the size that they can afford quarter-time ministry. However, because of this team model, that minister isn't there once a month. That minister is there every Sunday. They're the face with the place. The other campus has enough resources to have half-time ministry. So that person is still there every week. They're the face of the place. The difference is how often they preach live and what else they do. Because we're in more than one site, the campus minister at one place might be quarter time at one campus, but might be half time at a different campus because of the way the resources go. But it basically follows the UUA guidelines in terms of fair compensation. And I think it's possible as we go forward, especially in these models that you've heard today, that there are going to be opportunities where they're going to be looking for new campus ministers. This is like a job creation machine for ministry if it keeps going well.
Oh, I was just going to say again, remember the thing about this being the taste. I mean, this is one of the things, those details are what, when we bring workshops to different districts and regions, we do go down into some of that technical detail piece. So I just wanted to use that as an opportunity to highlight, to be continued.
My name is Bill Clinton, and I'm from the Unitarian Universalist Church of Delaware County, right outside of Pennsylvania, and we're looking at a multi-site arrangement. And Scott, my question is to you. So you had described five or six different opportunities to be a minister at different churches, and that in this last one where you were doing the multi-site, you felt like you were being a Unitarian Universalist minister, and for the first time, which I think was your statement. I was very curious about what that was, and my question is, so what was it for you as a minister, and then how was it for the congregation? Did they feel as if they were having a different experience?
Yeah, so... Yeah.
Mark is a good friend.
Right. Well, actually, any of my friends from First Unitarian of Rochester or Canandaigua, if you're here, could you stand up? So, number one, talk with the folks that are here, and they'll be able to share, I think, some of the great promise and things that felt good, and some of the things that are challenging about going into that relationship. So let me just defer that. And they can give you that honest. And the story will be both, you know, of just like any family coming together, two families coming together. There's great love, great privilege, great moments, and other. I guess I would just repeat again, for me, it wasn't the first time I felt like I was a Unitarian minister, but the first time I felt I was serving a congregational structure that reeked or just projected our theology of interdependence. I just don't think how you can draw our current, the way we have our organizational structure set up on a sheet of paper and say that reflects our theology. It reflects independence, it reflects other values. It was just simply that. And I was just saying there's a real heart piece in that for me. And so it was more just speaking from that personal place.
All right. Friends, it is time. I invite you to stay if you've got more questions to interact, but I want to release you and honor our time together so that you can get on to your lunch. Make sure you drink lots of water. Keep connected. Make sure you meet your midwife staff. And how about we meet back here in 50 years and celebrate